Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, the bank that puts you first. They can meet your banking and financing needs for personal, agricultural, business, commercial, mortgages, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn more.
Welcome in, Hokie fans, to episode 300 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Yes, the TSL podcast is still alive. It's been 4 weeks since we did episode 299, but we're glad to be back and able to patch together a show since it's mostly been Vacation City here at TSL. And by the way, if you type Vacation City into a word processor, it will autocorrect it to Vatican City. So thought I'd share that humorous little note with you. I'm Tech Sideline founder Will Stewart, and I'm your host today. This podcast is all about football recruiting. There have been 6 commitments since episode 299, including a few commitments that I don't want to speak for the group, but we think they herald the turning of the tide in Virginia Tech football recruiting in a positive way. We're going to go over all of those commitments, plus we're going to look ahead in recruiting to upcoming announcements and talk about football recruiting in general. We're also going to cover other Virginia Tech athletic news, and if we've got time, we will celebrate this being episode 300 by telling a few stories about how the Tech Sideline podcast came to be. And well, now if I'm going to go on about it, we have to do it. So, well, yes, we'll touch that on at the end. So that's all coming up on episode 300 of the Tech Sideline podcast, which starts right now. We record on Wednesday, July 5th, 2023 from our high-tech studio at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center right here in Blacksburg, Virginia. We welcome you in whether you're listening to your favorite podcast service or watching us on YouTube. And remember, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and click that notification bell. We make dozens of dollars on our YouTube channel every month, so please help us out and keep that gravy train going. So Tech Sideline, of course, is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. First Bank and Trust Company is the bank that puts you first. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. And a little bit of news on them. They are renewing their presenting sponsorship of Tech Sideline, so we're super psyched about that. I have 4 checking accounts and 2 loans with First Bank and Trust Company. So whatever they're paying us in sponsorship fee, I think they're making it back on me alone. All right, and this episode's also sponsored by the Hokie Way. Through your tax-deductible donations to the Hokie Way, collegiate athletes can become a voice for the charitable organizations that surround us. Learn more about how to get involved at thehokieway.org. Visit thehokieway.org to learn more, donate, and sign up for their email newsletter. Also follow them on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff. So let's introduce everyone. I'm, of course, and the Tech Sideline founder, Will Stewart, and to my right is lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way is managing editor David Cunningham, and producing today's show, hot from his job at Ameriprise, is Nick Brown. Thanks, Nick, for coming in. And we're actually recording this one, it's 5 o'clock, so kind of rare. You know, we don't do them live anymore, so most people listening won't care. So let's dive into football recruiting. Let me set the table for you. See if you agree or disagree. Feel free to disagree. The last podcast we did was June 7th, Wednesday, June 7th. And at that point in time, Virginia Tech had 7 verbal commitments. And it was a kind of a recruiting class like every other recruiting class, bunch of 3 stars. Nothing really momentous, in my opinion, had happened. Then I went on vacation on June 9th. And the next thing that happened was Gabriel Williams, correct? Yes, June 11th. 4-star. At that point in time, I looked it up, and Gabriel was the number 38 recruit all time. If you look at 247's all-time recruit list. That's kind of a big deal because I felt like Virginia Tech, you know, and yes, guys, I know the coaches pick who they want, and it's just rankings and et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, when we view from the outside, you'd like to see highly rated kids. And this is a thing that had not been happening a lot recently. So when the Williams commitment happened, Chris, go over where he was ranked, you know, how big of a get that was, because he came in as the highest rated recruit in the class at that point in time.
I think 0-3 actually has a number 1 in Maryland, which I think is a very aggressive ranking.
In their proprietary rankings.
In their own rankings.
Right.
Just like they have Johnson, the defensive end, number 1 in Virginia, which I think is aggressive. But they're still top 10 by 247 as well. Good offer list for all of them. I like Gabriel Williams and the fact that Virginia Tech beat out Pitt. And they beat out Pitt for Emmett Laws as well.
Yeah.
Who was also bumped to 4 stars on Rivals, by the way. So it would not shock me if he ended up there on one of the other services as well. But I think seeing a unanimous 4-star, like everybody's got him as a 4-star, it raises morale, especially one who is as all in on social media with the fan base as Gabriel Williams is. I think he's a very good prospect. I don't view him any higher or lesser than I did Mansour Lane, Dante Lovett, or Braylon Johnson when they signed with Virginia Tech. Maybe even throw Caleb Woodson in there. But from and I want to state that I had all those guys as 4-star recruits in my own personal rankings, right? So it's not like that I think Williams is worse than his ranking. I think those other guys were better than their ranking. But from an overall perception of it, I think it was a big get for Virginia Tech, and it seemed to open the floodgates to a certain extent.
So at that time, he was the highest rated recruit Virginia Tech had gotten since Doug Nestor and Jaden Payute in 2019.
2019, yeah. So a long time ago.
You're talking 4 years at this point. Some of his offers: Boston College, Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Maryland, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Penn State, Tennessee, Southern Cal, Virginia, and West Virginia. And you wrote a story after this, Chris, on, like you mentioned, on him and Emmett Laws, the steal from Narduzzi and profit. And I think that's one of the biggest keys to this is it's from a perception standpoint, he's a top player in Maryland. And Virginia Tech has a thing now with Maryland. I think Elijah Brooks, the running backs coach who was a big recruiter at Maryland, and then he was formerly the head coach at DeMatha for so long. He plays a big role in that. But you're also taking a guy who has been pursued by some programs like Pitt that we know develop those guys very, very well on the defensive side.
Ultimately, I trust Pat Narduzzi's evaluation of defensive players.
Yeah.
He was a great defensive coordinator at Michigan State, and he's built a very strong defense at Pitt. And I trust Brett Pry's evaluation of defensive players, too. He was a great defensive coordinator at Penn State. So that's good enough for me. I don't care if he hadn't had a single other offer. If he had those 2 offers, I'd view him in the same light. The fan base would not, but I would. I think you do 2 things when you recruit from your own region, when you have success in your own region. I mean, you help yourself if your evaluation is good, but you also weaken the opposition.
Yeah. So
when Virginia Tech directly beats out Pitt for defensive recruits, we not only help ourselves, but they hurt Pitt as well. And that's different than been like, if you go get a 4-star recruit from, and I know Virginia Tech does have a 4-star recruit from Tennessee, but I'll still use that state as an example. If Gabriel Williams and Emmett Laws came from Tennessee, Tech wouldn't have hurt Pitt. Yes, the Hokies would have helped themselves, but wouldn't have directly impacted in a negative standpoint the competition either. So if the Hokies can get to the point where they're really doing well within their own region, they don't not only help themselves, but they hurt their competition.
Right. So he's he's very excited
on Twitter.
Williams, yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. Almost to the point where I was like, slow your roll, young man, pace yourself, but he's been a very good, very vocal pickup. So I immediately, and I know some other Hokie fans thought of Demetrius Davis also. He was a 4-star who committed and was actively trying to recruit other players, and he got crickets in response.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, he's...
The difference there is, all right, that was in 2020, and he was in Texas.
Yeah.
Like, he's so far away that even if you could see people face-to-face and have personal contact with people, that he wouldn't have been able to do it because he was so far away.
Williams is visited.
Right.
And Williams has basically... June is such a big recruiting weekend. I don't know if Williams was here every single weekend, but he was here a good handful of the weekends. He took his official visit, I want to say, on sometime during June, maybe, or maybe it was maybe it wasn't that, but maybe he was in town a lot of the time, and so it's not just that he's preaching from afar and saying, "Hey, come join." He's there, and it sure seems like he's got a really close relationship with a lot of the staff already. Him and Davi Belfour and Emmett Lodge. Those seem like the three guys who are kind of tying this class together so far, that are actively getting out and pursuing the guys and saying, "Hey, come join." And just comparing it to Davis, like you brought up, that's one guy who lives kind of far away, preaching to a giant audience. Whereas you got three guys who are all pretty highly rated saying, "Hey, come join our group." And I think it's slowly helped Virginia Tech pick up momentum. And like Chris said, I think he's a really good prospect in his own right.
And he's local. He sees all those guys on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Because of camps and things like that. And that part of Maryland, like Maryland's not a big state, at least not the recruitable part of Maryland. The western part that's, stretched over into West Virginia.
It's basically West Virginia.
Right. That doesn't
not
really
much there.
That doesn't count from recruiting per se. You're basically talking from DC to Baltimore. That little corridor. I don't have to just throw it out there. Gabriel Williams was fishing with Chance Wiggins yesterday.
Who's committing tomorrow?
Who's announcing
on Thursday?
He's announcing tomorrow. We hope he's committing.
He's committing to somebody.
And we'll get to him.
I have a very good idea of where I think he's going to go to school. But
you want to mention that Torrey Smith was with him?
Yeah, but I don't think that's not going to come into play there. I don't think. But that's the point I'm trying to make is if you can start the momentum regionally, all those guys know each other.
Yeah.
And so that was June 11th, and then you get 3 commits on June 12th, and I'll list them all really quickly. Andrew Hanchuk, who is a 3-star defensive end, 6'5" tackle. Okay.
He'll play tackle.
Yeah, my notes from David. By the way, David put together a lot of notes for the show. Huge help because I don't like hosting, so he helped a lot. But defensive lineman from Cleveland, Ohio, number 40 player in Ohio per 247. Aiden Lynch, a 3-star offensive tackle from New Jersey, top 20 player in the state. And then to kind of bookend with Gabriel Williams, you got Marcellus Barnes, a 4-star corner from Chattanooga, Tennessee. So, we'll go over the numbers here in a minute. Tech just hadn't been, again, we're talking ratings. They've gotten 4-star talent in recent years, but not guys that were rated 4 stars. Mm-hmm. And then you get 2 in 2 days. And that's when I really thought that things had some positive momentum was forming there. So whatever comes to mind with those 3 guys, throw it at me. You got Hanchuk, Lynch, and Barnes. So tell me what you think.
Hanchuk briefly plays end in a 3-man line. He'll play tackle. 6'5", 260. Only played in like 4 games this past year because of a torn ACL. So you can't really evaluate him. He's really difficult to evaluate by watching his film because there's not much film. And he's sort of playing in a different role.
Right.
So he's one of those you're just like, let's just trust their evaluation.
And he doesn't have a huge offer.
Correct. Because of that.
West Virginia, Toledo, Temple, Miami of Ohio. And
he tore his ACL and he's diabetic.
Yeah.
So that is going to scare some schools off.
Yeah.
Obviously. So it's one of those things that might turn out to be brilliant. And you're like, everybody else shouldn't have backed off. So we'll see. You have to trust their evaluation on that. Oh, my goodness. Barnes, he's one of those guys, like, this is going to be a year where Tech fans are going to feel like On 3 is the best recruiting service. Because I believe they've got him number one in
Tennessee. Yeah, so you've got the number 1 kid, and we'll get to in Virginia, Maryland and Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And after signing the number 1 in West Virginia last year. I think that's
On 3.
You're right. So and I think that's an aggressive ranking for all 3 of those guys, but I do think they're top 10 level
consensus
guys, maybe
top
5 guys in their state. Had a good offer list, good pickup. All right. Let me think. Who are the other 2?
Well,
Aiden Lynch is the other guy.
Aiden Lynch is the other one of the 3.
Of the 3 that we were just talking about. The offensive tackle from New Jersey.
I love him.
Yeah.
He's got a really impressive offer list. Penn State, Boston College, Georgia.
I don't have the entire commit
Michigan
list.
State, Nebraska, Pitt, and Stanford.
He is the most sure thing of any signee or commit in this class, I think.
Really?
I think he's a great prospect.
Huh.
He almost visited Georgia. So he's listed with an offer from Georgia, and then he didn't, and he had a visit scheduled, and it didn't happen. So they probably you're limited with official visits if you're a school.
My guess is Georgia found realized he wasn't going to come to Georgia.
I think Georgia's generally only signs 5-star and 4-star offensive linemen, and Georgia can only have 50. You can only take 56 official. You can only use 56 official visits per year.
So they use it on somebody else.
I think he was very close to having a real committable offer from Georgia. Wow. I don't think he did, but I think he was very close. I think he was pretty high on their board. He's got some of the longest arms you'll see as an offensive line prospect.
He's 6'7", 275.
Doesn't have the rankings like the other guys.
No.
But I am as high or higher on him as I am anybody that Tech has committed or is continuing to recruit for this class.
Man, strong words. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think the thing about Barnes is Derek Jones and Pearson Prelude have done a really good job in terms of recruiting defensive backs. I know there's another one we'll talk about up next, but you throw in just all of the defensive backs that came in this last class, right? I would say Braylon Johnson was kind of the guy who tied everything together, Highland Springs, Richmond. Virginia Tech has done a really good job of upgrading in that defensive back room. You've already got Mansour Delane. You got a Dorian Strong that's going to be around for a couple years. You brought in Georgia Southern kid Derek Canteen.
They all have 3 years of eligibility left.
And then you continue to upgrade and get in really, really good talent between, say, a guy like Dante Lovett or Braylon Johnson. There are two different Williams. There's so many really, really talented kids that came in this last class, and now you have Barnes, and the kid we'll talk about next. And Virginia Tech continues to upgrade that position. I think that's going to be one where you're going to look at next season or a year after, when Dorian Strong or Mansour Delane or Derek Canteen, assuming they still use their eligibility and they're still around, Virginia Tech is going to have one of the best defensive back cores, I think, in the ACC.
Yeah.
Now, let's be very clear. Virginia Tech currently has 5 true freshman cornerbacks in their
so
program.
it's a very young group currently, but down the road it will only get better, you presume.
There's going to be major competition.
It'll work itself out.
And the depth, and these guys are going to be fighting it out for spots on the depth chart behind those top 3 guys. Some of them will hit the transfer portal as a result, because you can't sign 5 corners in one class and then another 2 corners in the next class, and everybody's happy with their playing time or lack thereof, and everybody decides to stay for 5 years. That's not going to happen here. This is going to be a competition for who enters the portal 2 or 3 years from now. And I think I like all the guys Tech signed last year.
Yeah.
Really like that group, that defensive back class.
Yeah.
And
Dante Lovett, Braylon Johnson, Cameron Fleming, Jonathan Penix, Mose Phillips, Thomas Williams, Christian Williams. I think that's it. Yeah. So that's
big fan.
Good
fan of that class. And Barnes is a highly touted guy. This isn't going to be as big a defensive back class as it shouldn't be, because it was such a big class last year. But when you bring in that many players over a 2-year span, especially when a lot of them are corners, then there's going to be attrition a couple years from now. But that's fine. The competition. I mean, there's going to be attrition anyway.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, the competition is going to be great, and it's going to make everybody at that position better. Even the players who don't win the jobs and end up transferring will be better players because of the competition, and that's what you want.
So joining that crowded room, June 30th, Noah Jenkins, defensive back from Highland Springs, 6'2", 200. Is he a safety or a corner?
Probably a safety.
Yeah, at that size.
Brent Pry sat in that chair last summer and said that he told Lauren Johnson that he'd be crazy if he didn't sign 1 Highland Springs player per year.
Yeah.
So
Noah Jenkins, come on down.
Right, and I keep calling him. Even when I type his name in an article, I always type Noah Spence, and then I'm like, "Yeah, you idiot," and then I have to erase it and go back.
Yeah,
Noah Spence, prize player at Penn State.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
now.
Okay. That's why
that
I
just
keep
seemed
calling
random.
that.
There was no Tech connection.
Correct.
Yes.
Right, but there's a
Pry connection. Yeah.
Correct. So that's why I keep doing it. But I think he's probably a safety.
Yeah. So Jenkins picked Tech over Ole Miss, Pitt, Penn State, South Carolina. Those were the other schools in his top 5.
Pitt. There's Pitt again. I like
Yeah.
it. And as you say, it keeps the pipeline going to Highland Springs.
Very important.
And joined the next day by a guy that I think is a very important recruit for this class, and that's Gerard Johnson, 4-star defensive end from Cox High School in Virginia Beach, 6'4", 235. That was a very quiet recruitment, I thought.
And he picked the Hokies over UVA.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a rare head-to-head battle.
when I was looking at the in-state rankings one day, and I'm like, I don't know anything about this guy.
Yeah.
So I randomly went into his profile, and I noticed that like the last 10 articles that had been written about him on 247 was written by the UVA site. So it just seemed like he seemed like a UVA lock. It didn't even seem like Tech was really recruiting him. They were behind the scenes. We didn't know it at the time, but it was not something that was out there. Just didn't pay a lot of attention to programs further away. This was a rare, very rare Virginia Tech versus UVA recruiting battle.
Yeah.
I feel like you just don't see a lot of them anymore.
You don't. And it seemed like he was going to UVA, and then he visited Tech, and once he visited Tech, I don't think UVA had a chance.
You want to bring up, Will, the tweet?
Yeah,
the
so I
tweet
want to
stuff?
share that story with you. I was doing the same thing Chris was doing. I'm like, I got to do research on this guy, and I went over and so if you follow the recruits on Twitter, the first thing I do is I go over and I hit the media tab on their tweets, and if it's a recruit who's not super active on Twitter, the smart ones tend to tweet out their offers. They'll like put out a graphic and say, pleased to get an offer from. So if you go to their media tab, you can just scroll down and get a quick feel for where their offers are from. So I didn't do this until he was on his Tech visit. And so the very first media tweet was he was walking in his hotel room and he was filming the stuff they'd laid out on the desk and on the bed. It's like, oh, okay, so that's cool. So he's here. And I scrolled down and like literally 3 tweets later, he'd been to UVA 2 weeks earlier, and it looked like the same video where he walked in and filmed the desk and filmed the bed. And then I started noticing the interaction that he was getting from these tweets. And so the UVA tweet had 10 replies and 10 retweets and 17,000 views, roughly. And the Tech tweet had 90 replies, something like 80 some retweets.
There were like over 1,000 likes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. And what I'm thinking of is 90,000 views. Yeah. So it was interesting because they're basically the same tweet from 2 different places, and you got much more interaction from Virginia Tech fans. Now, I would like to think that recruits don't pick schools based on the interaction they get on social media, except in the age of NIL, it is kind of important, that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that's how he made his decision. It was just an interesting exercise to see that.
I think there's a feel when you're being recruited by both schools that,
yeah,
Virginia Tech's coming off a tough season. Both programs are, but the Hokies at least have momentum on the recruiting trail. And I think they've got a staff, for the most part, of very effective recruiters. UVA just seems dead in the water.
Yeah.
They really seem like they
crickets.
had. I mean, they went there last year and they took a borderline All-American quarterback and turned him into a 7-touchdown, 12-interception guy
Who transferred out.
who immediately
transferred
left,
to NC
and I don't
State
blame
to
him.
meet his former offensive coordinator.
Right.
Isn't that game going to be fun?
Who went to Syracuse and turned a quarterback who couldn't pass into a quarterback who could magically pass, right? Yeah. So I think my gut feel from the outside looking in is their fan base. I don't think they're as active on social media as Tech fans anyway, but I don't think there's any momentum or any positive feelings about that program.
You need to go
So,
check out the Saber.
And I
think
think,
going on over there.
and I think you can sense that.
Yeah.
As a
can feel
recruit,
it.
I would agree.
But he's a guy at a position of need. Tech is, he's a highly rated guy. So Chris, I know you want to go into that.
I do. Tech's taken a decent number of defensive ends recently, but a lot of them for various reasons, whether it's their size or even in one case a potential qualifying issue,
Injury status.
Yeah. They're the one kid from Finn Later's a Canadian kid who's only played about 15 career games. Yeah. So a lot of those guys are more projects. It doesn't mean they don't have a high ceiling or they're not going to be good players, but you don't want to sign 4 or 5 straight projects at defensive end or at any one position.
Because it takes time to develop.
It does. And the thing with projects is everybody makes it a big story when by project you mean like a guy who has a high ceiling, but he's starting from a lower floor.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody makes a big deal out of it when one of those guys succeed, but to be 100% honest with you, most of them never reach their ceiling because they're starting from such a low point.
Yeah.
You can't sign a whole bunch of those guys in a row at one position. So getting Johnson in there is a guy who I think is starting at a higher floor. He's going to be ready earlier in his career. He's just more physically developed than some of those other guys and more of a sure thing. Yeah. I think, not to suggest that he is a sure thing because there's no such thing in recruiting, but
nobody's a sure thing but Aiden Lynch, right?
That's right. Yeah, he's the real deal.
Mansour Delane last year.
Yes, I was dead convinced on that. But yeah, I think it's a big one for Virginia Tech, and it's a big one for J.C. Price in particular because I personally have been worried about that. Yeah. You know, projects at defensive end, and then no defensive tackles at all in last year's class. I wanted to see some more finished products there. So if they can. I still think they'll take another defensive end in this class if they can get the right one, and I think that they wouldn't be inclined to have that guy be like Johnson be a more finished product, and the same thing at defensive tackle as well.
Yeah. So they've got 2 tackles and 2 ends right now. The 2 ends are Johnson and Derek Dandy,
correct?
Who's from Mount Airy,
and Dandy's one of the project types who's very much undersized.
6'4", 215.
Right.
And he himself has admitted
he told Jason Stame that his grades aren't very good.
Right.
So he's got academic work he needs to do. So he's undersized and he has some work to do from a grade standpoint. So you can't count on that if you're a coach. You should consider him to be a bonus. All right. Yeah. So they need to go find another defensive end for this class. I think someone who's a little more finished product. But from that standpoint, to me, that's why Johnson, he might, just from a pure need standpoint, he's the biggest commit of the class so far.
So, and the 2 tackles are Handchuck, who we talked about, and then Emmett Laws.
Emmett Laws is
from DeMatha.
Is starting at a much higher floor.
Yeah. So I guess if you look at the 4 defensive linemen right now, it's kind of, I would put like Johnson and Laws kind of in that tier, like first tier, because they're
non-projects,
higher ceiling, and then Handchuck and Dandy are kind of in the second tier.
Right, correct.
Just in terms of having a higher floor.
You can see them working out, and I totally understand why the staff is high on them, but there's enough issues with them, whether it be health-related or grades-related, where you cannot count on them to be like the... I'd rather take a third player at each position.
Yep.
And be safe. Yeah.
It's better safe than sorry, because I think you need to recruit well on the lines and at the high school level, because those guys are more expensive in the portal.
Yeah.
Because there's just not that many people in the big people
big guys,
that can move their feet. So when guys like that go in the portal, they become more expensive because it's just a lower supply and a high of those guys. So that creates a higher price. It's just supply and demand market.
Yeah.
There's a lot more 190-pound kids. Tech did not face very much competition for those 3 receivers they signed, because there's more receivers available.
Well, there's a lot of corners and receivers, and they're like wings in basketball.
Right.
There's a lot of guys who are 6'4" to 6'7".
There aren't a lot of 7-footers out there.
Right.
Kind of the same thing with these guys.
Yeah.
So that was a really good 3 weeks, and it got me, as an observer of the program, it got me excited for what this coaching staff is capable of. We hadn't really seen it until these last 3 weeks. Now to be fair, what I'm about to say, I don't want to drill too far into it, because it's actually a podcast in and of itself. But Virginia Tech under Fuente dialed back the recruiting. I had a really interesting conversation with an insider. Virginia Tech dialed back the recruiting in 2019 for the 2020 class, and it cost them. It wound up and
by dial back, you mean
they didn't focus on it in the summer of 2019,
and
in a way they should have.
And to put that in perspective, that was when the rules changed and recruits could start taking official visits over the summer.
Yeah, and Fuente chose not to crank up the volume on that, and other schools did, and
then Tech got behind.
Tech got behind. And that wound up being a small class of 16 kids. The average player rating was low. We'll get to that in a minute. The lowest of the last 7 or 8 years.
No, the lowest of the last 30 years.
Yeah.
The lowest since the 1995 class, which finished dead last in the Big East and then played for the national title.
I lost my train of thought. Come back. So not only was it a question of just 16 players signing in 2020, but it was a question of their having a low average rating. And then COVID came along, so the 2021 class was a problem. 2022 was, Fuente was on the hot seat, and so
that turned out to be a good class.
it did.
Well,
yes.
I mean, it was ranked in the top 25 the day he got fired.
Yeah.
So they had some issues in 2019 that caused that class to be bad, and to a lesser extent, the 2021 class to be bad.
But the 2022 class was like,
and they were starting to catch up.
But they had solved their issues.
Yes.
Like Daryl Tapp had come in, and Daryl Tapp was a guy that Fuente really listened to, and Tapp was like, we need to start visiting every high school in the state, basically.
Yeah. And
Fuente said, okay, and approved it, and they started doing that. And then COVID hit. So it put it off by a year.
Yeah.
So they couldn't do it. But once recruiting reopened, they went out and they started doing that.
Yeah.
And as a result, they had 3 of the top 10 players in the state committed the day he got fired.
yeah.
So
Do you remember who they were? It was
Givens was one
Givens
of
was
them.
one of them.
Givens.
Ramon Brown.
Raymond
Brown from Manchester.
And who I don't remember who the third one. Oh yeah.
But he didn't stay with Tech.
Correct.
Brown and the other one, Givens is the only one of the top 10 that actually came to Virginia Tech.
Right.
But Tech was in a much better spot. And then I think you're seeing that. I think Pry and his staff, when Pry came in, because a lot of the first couple months was just going out, creating connections, and retaining as many of the kids from the class as you can. And then you see in this 2023 class, you can see Tech starting to make a little bit of progress. And I think now this will be Pry's second full class.
Yes.
You'll really start to see Tech get a kid like Gerard Johnson, arguably a top 10 kid from the Commonwealth, right? And you maybe more of those types of kids.
And they're doing something right, because this is coming off a 3-8 season.
Yeah.
So not only looking at the 24/7 composite ratings and their player rankings and that sort of thing, it's not just that they've got 13 commits at this point, and in air quotes, only 3 of them are 4 stars. But the 3 stars in this class generally have a higher rating than the 3 stars that they've been signing recently. So it leads to an average player rank at this point in time of 87.91. And I went back to the 2016 class, which is kind of Frank's last class. Frank retired and they signed with Fuente had just come on the job.
Yeah, it was basically Beamer's last class.
Yeah, and that 87.91 average player rating is higher than anything going back to 2016. So stars are not granular enough. Even the level of 3-star that they're getting commitments from is higher.
Mm-hmm. That's why I do half-star ratings every year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I do 4-star, 3.5-star. Hopefully, I might be able to give out a 4.5-star or 2 this year for this year's class. Maybe nice. I will. Maybe I won't.
Lynch, I don't know. Lynch, keep your eye open.
Yeah, oh man, that's a 5 right there for sure.
Okay, well, slow your roll. But yeah, I do think, and you wrote a story about this in the last couple of weeks, just about Virginia Tech's average recruit ranking is improving.
Correct.
Tech's not necessarily moving up in terms of overall rank, not jumping 15 spots.
Right.
But you can tell that the ranking of recruits is gradually improving. And like Will said, 87.91, that's better than, there's only 2 other classes
that were even in the
87. That was 2018 and 2019.
And that was at the peak of Fuente's momentum, you would say.
The 2018 class he would have signed after the 2017 class when Tech was 9-4, right? And
17 season.
and then the 2019 class would have signed after a.
They were 6 and 7, but most of those guys are committed before that
Yes,
season even starts.
yes.
Right. I mean, they flipped Doug Nestor from Ohio State that year, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and that was purely a Fuente play. Remember, he had
a 6-hour in-home visit with, and they got along so well, right? So the main issue with Fuente, you're right, is when the rule change happened, his response to it turned out to be the wrong one. Yeah. And they got that fixed by the end of his tenure, but unfortunately it was too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in his 2018 to 2019 classes, he signed 7 and 8 4-stars respectively.
Correct.
And then 2020, 2021, he signed 1 4-star in each class.
Right.
And
That's when you started to see Tech get behind the 8 ball.
yeah, and so let's be reasonable here. We like this recruiting class, and we like the way it's coming together.
Yes.
It represents an upward trajectory, but the way I would phrase it is, this is where Virginia Tech should be recruiting.
Yeah.
Even in the age of NIL and all the worry about that kind of stuff, this is how Virginia Tech should be recruiting.
4th to 6th in the ACC. Like, I never expect Tech to have a higher ranked class than Clemson or Florida State or even Miami.
Yeah.
Right? So occasionally maybe you finish 3rd. Generally you're 4th to 6th. Which is fine, because Wake Forest can win 9 games by finishing dead last every year in recruiting, because it's, if Virginia Tech is evaluating correctly and then they develop properly and they have the right coaches,
Getting in the right kinds of players.
Exactly. They'll win plenty of games with an average player ranking of 87.91.
Yeah.
That's not going to be an issue unless one of those other things is wrong. Like, the actual recruiting is going to be fine.
Yeah.
Or you sign in the right players and you develop them, that'll determine the success or failure of the program.
One of Fuente's classes, which was a very highly rated class, I don't remember which one it was, but you go and look at it, and the retention was horrible.
Yeah.
Sure.
There were maybe one or two
remember,
of those.
there were so many bad evaluations back then. Well, remember, they didn't have full evaluation tools because they didn't have Huddle.
Yikes.
I'm serious.
I know.
I mean, that was part of it.
Yeah.
They
and they didn't take the visits, around the state in particular that they probably should have.
Right. But, Virginia Tech has all the tools now, not to beat Georgia, but let's walk before we run here. They have all the tools they need at their disposal to compete at a high level in the ACC.
You want to go through, just for fun, let's go through the 2018 class. And go
through the 4-stars in that class.
Okay. Give me 1 sec to flip my phone. The 4-stars in that class, I was going to go through and tell you which guys panned out. The 4-stars in that class: Quincy Patterson.
Right. Attempted 80 passes as a senior in high school. Very physically talented, but again, all right, he's your low floor, high ceiling guy. Like, the chances of him going from the basement, he started in the basement. But he had a ceiling of the attic, right?
Yeah.
The ceiling is the roof. He never made it out of the attic.
All right, so next.
Trey Turner.
Trey was pretty high ceiling guy, but stayed the same size, same strength, same explosiveness level his whole career.
Good productive player, though.
Yeah.
Jeremy Webb, who
ripped his Achilles
injuries
twice.
Yeah.
James Mitchell.
Yep, good player.
Ding, ding, ding.
Keyshawn Artis.
Great guy, great Hokie.
Very good run stop.
Great tackler.
Not a bad run stopper going forward, but didn't have the lateral quick. He kept getting bigger. He got too big.
Do you know off the top of his head where he transferred to? He's got 1 more year, right?
Keyshawn Artis. Oh, man.
Yeah. I think he just had a surgery recently. I think his mom put it on Twitter. But anyway, I thought our artist was really good too. But I think when it came down to it, he put on a little bit too much weight that his frame could support. Yeah. I know after he left Virginia Tech, he lost about 25 pounds.
Really?
And he posted pictures of his stomach on Twitter, and he just did a much better job keeping his body
Northern Illinois.
in shape. Northern Illinois. That's it.
Okay.
But it was just not a great evaluation. Now, that being said, the whole fan base would have been up in arms if we weren't going to take a 4-star linebacker from the 757.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, Oscar Smith. 2 other 4-stars in the class: Daryl Simmons.
Just height in?
No, wide receiver.
No, he's a wide receiver.
Right.
Just
never
didn't work out.
Never panned out. And Dax Hollyfield.
Dax turned out to be a good player.
Some of the other talented players in that class that have had a big impact for Virginia Tech. Alan Tisdale was in that class.
Tisdale was probably a 3.5 guy. Yeah.
Luke Tenuta.
NFL.
worked out.
See, that was a great evaluation.
Well, you liked Tenuta from the get-go.
Oh, I
right?
did. Well, and here's the thing. Vance Weiss, proven track record now in my eyes. Don't care if a guy's a 2-star recruit or a 4-star recruit.
Christian Darrisaw.
You're right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Tech beat out Delaware State.
The other two big guys were both DBs, Armani Chapman and Jermaine Waller.
Mm-hmm.
Two other 3-star guys that went on to have a pretty big impact at Tech.
Yeah.
So let's get back on track here. I love that kind of stuff. We ought to do a podcast one time just talking about just pulling up old recruiting classes and just talking about them. All right. So I like where they are momentum wise, but this class has a chance to get even better. When Williams committed, he was the highest rated recruit in the class. I think he's down to 3 or 4 now.
And he said that's unacceptable.
He said we need more better players. So coming up, so we're recording this again. We're recording this from basically 5 to 6 p.m. on Wednesday, July 5th. Chance Wiggins is announcing on Thursday, July 6th. To my knowledge, Wiggins hasn't put a time on it yet. Any idea?
No, he has not.
I don't think he has.
He has been like, I think in one of the services, he's like 99% going to Virginia Tech is their projection. So, we feel good that Tech will get a commitment from Wiggins. He is a top 10 guy, fringe top 10 guy in the state, number 9, number 10 in the state. And
he's from King George High School.
Yes, King George High School.
Just like Mekhi White.
Yeah.
Another wide receiver prospect who will probably decide in July.
Yeah, and we'll get to White in a second. So, again, the average player rank in this class so far is 87.91. Wiggins is an 88.5. He's going to elevate the class. He's a 3-star, but it's a relatively high 3-star. Again, and that's the theme in the class, that a lot of the 3-stars are, a level above the 3-stars they've been signing recently. So we wanted to wait and do this podcast on Thursday and wait for Wiggins' announcement, but Chris is going to be out of town by then, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. And the guy that, again, I don't follow this stuff super close, guys, but this guy kind of came out of nowhere for me. Keelan Adams, wide receiver. There's a theme here. Wide receiver from Green Run High School in Virginia Beach. One of the very top recruits in the state. Did you guys think that Virginia Tech had a good shot at him before he made his official visit recently?
I knew Tech was recruiting him hard, and I know he took at least 2 or 3 unofficial visits to Tech. Generally, when a guy takes like 3 unofficial visits, it is a sign of heavy interest.
He's interested.
So I did always think Tech had a chance. I didn't, and I don't know that Tech's going to land him right now. If I gun to my head, I would bet that they would. Yeah. But I don't know it. But 2 months ago, I wouldn't have given them a great chance just based on past history of Tech.
He's a number 3 recruit in the state.
Right. Just based on past history of Virginia Tech with guys ranked that high. But he has had a relationship with Tech for a long time. Tech first found him when he was in the 9th grade. Daryl Tapp first found him.
Yep. Daryl
Tapp, when he was in the process of evaluating recruits for Virginia Tech, Tapp found him and offered him.
Yeah.
So
this is a long relationship.
Yes. And I know Tapp left and most of that staff left, but Jace Price is still here and some of those recruiting staff members are still here.
He's a Virginia Beach guy. I'm sure Fontel Mines knew him when he was over at Old Dominion and stuff like that.
Worse King George? Is that?
No, we're talking about Adams from Virginia Beach.
You're right.
Yeah, Green Run.
Yeah. I'm getting
so
sure.
It's not like Fontel Mines is a guy who's recruited Virginia. Right. He's been in the 7x7, right? So the ties seem deep,
right,
with this program.
And what it sounds like, he officially visited Virginia Tech and Alabama. Alabama's got several major wide receivers already committed.
Their wide recruiting is obscene. Their wide receiver recruiting is obscene.
And
that's Holman Wiggins for you,
right? And he also took an unofficial visit to South Carolina, but he didn't take an official visit.
That's the other school that is perceived to be
I thought it would be Tech in Alabama, but since Alabama's are taking so many guys,
it seems like it's Tech, South Carolina.
Yeah.
with the momentum the staff has right now, I would back them right now to get an in-state
especially
player
if
over
Wiggins
South Carolina.
commits to Virginia Tech too.
Right, I think momentum builds on itself. It's just good recruiting is partly you got to do something to get the ball rolling, but once the ball starts rolling, you've got to do something to screw it up to make it stop.
Yeah. So Wiggins is announcing on Thursday the 6th, and Adams is announcing on Thursday the 13th.
Yeah.
That would so again going back to the player rating thing, he would be the highest rated player in the recruiting class. He's a 92.8. So again, he's a legit 4-star. He'll elevate the class. And I just dropped my notes under the table, so give me a second, folks.
Yeah. At least we're not live. This is why I suggested let's never do it live again. We can edit things like this out.
But as we wrote down, if Virginia Tech lands both Wiggins and Adams, that's along with Johnson, that's 3 of the top 10 players in the Commonwealth.
Yeah. And so this question got asked on the board the other day, you know, what's the most top 10 players Tech has ever signed in the state? And I think it was 5. And that was just once. In Virginia Tech's recruiting heyday, they would get 3 of the top 10 players in the state, maybe 4.
It's not like Tech was out there clean sweep every year.
I think getting kind of like what we talked about, though. You said this is where Virginia Tech should be recruiting. I think getting 3 kids from the top 10 in the state, that is a reasonable expectation.
A state that is recruited much harder by the SEC, for example, and Florida State than
and a Penn State
than it was back in the mid 2000s,
Yes.
when it was mainly a Tech and UVA thing year after year. So Tech's class is currently ranked 37th in the country in the 24/7 Sports Composite. That's limited by the fact that there's only 13 commits. Ranked 37th in the country. You can look at their class projector. If you add Wiggins, that moves them up to 34th. If you add Adams, that moves them up to 29th. And that's just on 15 commits. That's a pretty darn good class ranking for what is at that point in time.
And the thing, for overall ranking and ACC ranking and all that these days, you can kind of ignore that. I mean, the recruiting services back in the day used to actually examine everybody's class and assign a ranking based on gut feel. That way, if you only signed 18 players, you weren't going to be automatically behind the class that signed 23 players simply because they signed 5 more guys. If they felt like you had a better class, they were going to rank you ahead of them. That's not how they do it these days. It's a straight mathematical formula. So if you sign fewer players, like Tech is not going to sign as many guys this year as they did last year. What I hate about the 247 site is that you actually can't sort on average player ranking. So I have to go through every school.
And you have to kind of scan it.
For the ACC. But that's what you need to be paying attention to this year.
But to your earlier point, if you go into the ACC rankings and sort by, you can do it on On3.
Okay.
You can sort by average player rating. Now, they love them some Virginia Tech commits. And they've got Tech's average player ranking at 4th in the ACC. Behind Clemson, Florida State, and I can't remember the...
probably Miami.
Yeah, Miami.
Right. So like you would expect.
Yeah. Which, again, where Virginia Tech is supposed to be.
If Virginia Tech can dominate recruiting, not dominate because Penn State's always going to be recruiting
success.
This year, I will say be the main recruiter in the region between Philadelphia and Charlotte.
Yeah,
because there's plenty of talent.
There's plenty, they're going to win a heck of a lot of football games if they're well coached. With Penn State's going to be competing in there some too, but Penn State's also going to go a little further northwest than Virginia Tech, and in some cases even a little more nationally than Virginia Tech. So they're going to compete with Penn State a lot, but I feel like if Tech can be the number 1 or number 2 recruiting school in that little region, then I think they can win a lot of games.
You know, it's interesting though. I put down the state breakdown. 1 kid from Florida, 2 from Maryland, 3 from North Carolina, 1 from New Jersey. That's your boy Lynch. 2 from Ohio, 1 from Tennessee, and 3 from Virginia. And before this past week, Virginia Tech only had 1 player from the Commonwealth, right? So I think it just kind of goes to show Virginia Tech is not just recruiting the Commonwealth really, really hard, kind of recruiting the area, the radius.
You have to.
Yeah.
Wow. So looking at, we just went over the upcoming announcements of Wiggins and Adams. They're both state of Virginia players. And so we've got 4 other recruits to keep an eye on. They're all in-state players. Mekhi White, who is number 7 in the state.
He seemed like he was hard leaning out of state.
Yeah.
And then he took his official
Michigan
visit.
and Maryland.
His official visit, I believe, the same week as Keelan Adams. And, Virginia Tech takes 3 receivers in this class, which I think they probably will. Like, I think Tech might actually do a clean sweep of those 3 in-state receivers. I probably shouldn't bet that, but
because this stuff will live on YouTube forever.
But I feel like they set themselves up in a pretty good position. Like, I'm very confident they're going to get Wiggins, and Wiggins and Mekhi White are actually teammates. I feel like that would be I don't know. I feel like this has a chance. Yeah. If Tech gets those 3 guys after signing 4 receivers last year, then that's that.
Four,
you're done.
Four pretty good receivers last year.
You're done. You're stopping.
So Mekhi White is a top 10 in the state. That would be 4 guys in the top 10.
Correct.
Next one to keep an eye on, and we kind of thought this was over, is safety. Zahir, I think is the first name, Rayner, who is Wiley Rayner's son.
He's a great player for UVA.
Rayner committed to Minnesota. He's committed to Minnesota, but there's a strong buzz that he flipped to Virginia Tech when he made a visit.
Yeah. He unexpectedly made a visit the last weekend in June, the last recruiting weekend.
Was that an official?
Yeah.
Probably,
Dean, he's a Trinity Episcopal kid.
Yes, and I think, and he's a big-time hitter. I think he's a great football player. Him and Cameron Fleming, both from Trinity Episcopal, kind of very similar players.
Big-time hitter like Mose Phillips, big-time hitter?
Likes contact. I'll put it that way. But just not a very tall guy, but low center of gravity. Would remind you a little bit of Corey Bird, I would say, if you watch him play. I know a lot of people probably don't go back that far, which makes me sad. But anyway, at any rate, I would love to add him in the class. I think he committed to Minnesota to avoid. Originally, I think he was like, I can't go to UVA because they're so bad, even though my dad went there. But I can't go to Tech either because my dad went to UVA. So you know what? I'm just going to go to
Well, the funniest thing
Minnesota.
is he probably spoke to Fontel Mines, and Fontel Mines is like...
Well, I coach... excuse me, yeah.
I coach at Virginia Tech, and I played at UVA.
Exactly. Yeah, so... But we don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, there's just a lot of buzz.
No, it's one of those things where like he tweeted that week, he was like 100% committed to Minnesota, and then 3 days later he's on
official to Tech.
And generally when that happens, and then he went back and deleted the tweet. So generally when something like that happens, that commitment does not last.
Through some stuff.
Yes, he is. Yes,
so the next one on the list is a 3-star defensive lineman. Top 25 guy in the state from Mountain View High School in Stafford, Eric Mensa.
Yeah,
is that Taiwan Garbage High School? He's from he was from Stafford, but
yeah.
I know that's.
I don't think it's the same high. So it's not Mountain View.
No, but that's a big region that Pry has loved to recruit.
The Fredericksburg area has grown rapidly in terms of recruits over the last 20 years. It used to be like you hardly see anybody from that area. Like I remember. Oh gosh, she was the punt returner for Tech in the 98 wide receiver. 83.
He had Angelo Harrison.
Ding, ding, ding. He was from Spotsylvania, but other than that, you just didn't see too very many recruits from up there.
So I did not know until literally yesterday, because I'm not strong in geography. Fredericksburg is basically in between Richmond and Northern Virginia, correct?
In between Richmond and Charlottesville, basically. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
on,
okay. It's a really, really pretty town.
So I just searched the word Stafford in our TSL database, and there are 3 or 4 kids that came up that committed to Penn State from Stafford.
Interesting.
And in terms of the number that committed to that is. And all three of them were since 2016. Now there are a handful of guys from
name them
for Virginia Tech.
Who are they?
Josh Ball, he was an offensive lineman. Nana Asiedu.
Yep, offensive line.
And can you guess the running back?
Yeah, Devin Ford.
Yeah.
I knew he was going to be on
The one Virginia. Oh, never mind. That's Stafford, Texas. Tech hasn't. Anthony Shagog, J.R. Collins. Those were some guys from up in that area.
Yeah.
But Cordero Thompson.
Yeah.
That's a throwback. But yeah, that's an area Brent probably loves to pursue.
Yeah.
But Mintz is another guy whose recruitment has been pretty quiet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I forget, I think Maryland, West Virginia maybe, are teams that are on his list. Now, I've heard what the word is, like he's holding out to see if he gets an Ohio State offer.
Right.
That's where he wants to go.
Yeah, but I don't think
he's going to get one.
Yeah.
I think they've got their eye on him, but I think he could be one of those guys where they may offer if he had a really good senior season and they wanted to pick up an extra player at that position towards the end of the class.
Yeah.
But so there's always that risk if you recruit him. That said, physically he's I don't view him the same way I view Laws, but he's not this raw prospect that you don't know much about. He's not undersized. He's got good size.
He looks like 6'3", 255. That's what he lists.
I've seen him listed anywhere between 255 and 285.
Yeah.
And I've seen Tavorian Copeland listed at 195, and then he enrolls at 178.
Okay, wait a minute. That's later in the podcast.
And I've seen Zeke Wimbish listed at 210, and then he rolls at 232. So it goes both ways. Anyway,
Right,
we don't know how big these kids are.
So let's talk about the white whale of the class, Chris Cole.
Chris Cole,
man.
almost greatest name of all time. I think
Generally regarded as the top recruit in the state. It's him and I can't remember the other player that, depending upon where you look, there.
Well, on 3 has Johnson.
Well, I mean,
Peyton Lewis.
But yes,
You're talking Peyton Lewis.
Peyton Lewis.
Yes, that is correct. So Cole is he's from Salem High School, right?
Same as Peyton Lewis.
Not Salem, Virginia Beach, Salem.
Correct.
In a 4-week stretch in June, in order, he visited Penn State, Virginia Tech, officially, Penn State, Virginia Tech, Georgia, and Miami. Now, this isn't a kid who's going to make a decision soon, from what we understand, but Virginia Tech has also made up a lot of ground with him, even though he's extremely highly rated and getting recruited by programs with history and NIL and huge staffs and all that.
And a recent national championship.
Yeah.
Well, Tech was the first school to offer him, and he's visited Tech 10 times.
Unofficially.
So I wouldn't say they've made up ground with him. I think
That is correct.
They've held their ground. Is a better term.
I know
he was at the one of the basketball games, right?
Price sat next to him the whole time. That was before I realized he was considered a major prospect. There were a couple other guys there. Like I want to say even maybe Keelan Adams was at that junior day event. And Price sat next to Chris Cole the whole time. So that should tell you right there how they felt about Chris Cole. I think he's a guy, we'll do the whole floor ceiling thing again. He's not going to start from quite as high a floor as most top 100 prospects, at least as of right now. We'll see what kind of development he makes as a senior, but he only moved to linebacker as a junior.
Okay.
So he's not one of those guys that went out there and put up 120 tackles.
He only really has like one year of playing linebacker.
Correct. So he's hit a growth spurt recently and moved closer to the line of scrimmage. So there's a lot of polishing that needs to be done. But big frame, a lot of athletic ability, local kid, a legitimate 4-star level recruit.
Yeah, I actually watched this film. I don't watch a lot of film, but I watched his, and they line him up all over the place.
Sure.
He doesn't put his hand on the ground, but his junior year, they put him at the end of the line. They put him in the middle. They even had him at safety. Mm-hmm. Somebody that big playing safety is pretty scary.
Yeah. Most of the time, though, he is at what Virginia Tech would call the star position.
Yeah.
Formerly Sam linebacker.
The wide side linebacker / nickel. The guy who's lined up over the slot receiver or coming down and blitzing or whatever. That doesn't mean Tech is necessary. That doesn't mean he would start out there at Virginia Tech or that he wouldn't eventually be at another linebacker position. But right now, that's where he would be most comfortable playing in the Tech system. We have heard that Tech feels pretty good about his recruitment.
Yeah, but it's he's going to go maybe close to signing day, so it's a long road.
Yeah, it's a long way off.
But Virginia Tech's positioned very well.
I know everybody keeps asking, what do you think about Chris Cole? What do you think about Chris Cole? But I don't think that's not going to get decided for a while. Like he's come out and said he wants to take a couple more visits this football season.
Who'd you mention? Notre Dame?
Notre Dame and maybe Alabama again.
Yeah, I think it's just important that Virginia Tech continues to gain momentum on the recruiting trail.
Absolutely.
Continues to do what it has been doing recently, right? If Tech comes out here, if Virginia Tech comes out here and picks up Chance Wiggins and Keelan Adams, and maybe you grab Mekhi White, you're sitting there with 4 top 10 kids in state, and you got a chance to go for maybe arguably the best one.
Yeah. Right. And as opposed to like, let's say they won't, but let's say Tech strikes out with that group.
Yeah.
Then when it comes down to it, Cole's probably going to look at it and be like, I'll probably just go to Georgia. I really like Tech, but I'll probably go to Georgia. It'll be Deshaun Hand part.
I was going to say it'll be Deshaun Hand all over again.
It's exactly what it would be. But I mean, I don't know. If signing day was July 7th, I think he'd sign with Tech.
That seems to be the buzz around him right now, that Tech is ahead. But like we said, it's a long road, and we got to see if he stays there.
Yeah.
So this is the most interested and excited I've been about Virginia Tech football recruiting in a while. I do think they need to improve along, particularly the defensive line. As we talked about earlier, there are a lot of wide receivers and a lot of corners out there, and it's great to have good talent in your program at key positions. But I mean, you guys know the big guys are harder to get.
Got to overpay for them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like transfer portal guys. So if you got to go, like Tech's gonna have to go out on the portal for at least one defensive tackle this year. Yeah, most likely. But a good quality defensive tackle is a take for almost everybody in the transfer portal every year because there's just not that many really good ones. But again, supply and demand. So you've got your budget of NIL money, right? And you've got your system of where you pay this much for this position, for this a starter at this position, and whatever.
That's right. You're the GM, man.
Just like coaches got to be NFL. It's just like professional sports. That's the way it is with NIL and how coaches treat it. You're gonna have to break your wage budget probably because of the demand for that position and the low supply. So again, that's why I think high school recruiting is incredibly important for Virginia Tech on the lines. So hopefully they can finish strong on the lines. And so in the future, they can avoid the portal at those positions as much as possible.
Yeah. And the other elephant in the room is go out and play better on the field than you did last year.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'll also throw this qualifier in that, like, if Tech has 3 wins again by the end of the season, then,
who knows what?
Then, I don't think Cole would end up signing with Tech. But, you've got to – they've got the momentum now. It's important to
just go out and
keep it going, right? And you can't – they're buying into the message now that the program's getting rebuilt. So it's important to show progress on the field this year. And by progress, I don't mean you have to go out and win 10 games or something like that. Just do better than you did last year.
Yeah. So anything else to add about recruiting?
I think we covered everything.
I can't think of anything.
How far into it are we?
45. Are we really?
An hour, man.
Yeah, I believe it.
Man,
that was a lot of guys to cover.
So let's see. One other thing I did want to talk about, shifting gears. Chris, you used to do this every year, and it had been a couple of years since you did it. You run approval ratings, and so again, folks, this is a different topic. We are no longer on recruiting, where you present TSL subscribers with a poll to get their approval rating on President Tim Sands, Whit Babcock, Brent Pry, Mike Young, whoever's holding those positions at Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for a number of years.
And then I stopped.
Yeah. But then you started it up again, and you recently ran it. So you ran the poll about a week ago, and today's
Yeah, about
2 weeks ago. So you got the results, and about 1,500 people voted out of our subscribers. And today you ran the article kind of analyzing the results of that. So let's go over that a little bit, and let's start with Tim Sands. And what I did was the choices you gave, Chris, were strongly approve, neutral, disapprove, strongly disapprove. So
and there's also another category that basically says, I don't care.
I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
So what I decided to do was go over everybody's combined approval and strongly approve ratings. And for Tim Sands, that combination is 57%.
Right. Is it?
Yep. I got 44% approved, 13% strongly approved.
Okay.
So 57% total approved.
With I believe a fairly significant neutral voting.
Interesting.
The interesting thing about Sands is the last time I did this was 2019. I quit doing it in 2020 either because I forgot because of COVID, or I thought everybody's so mad because of COVID that it's going to taint the results of this voting, so I'm not going to do it. But at any rate, the percentage of people who disapproved of Sands and strongly disapproved of Sands is the exact same in 2023 as it was in 2019. It was like 10% and 3%.
4 years ago.
Yeah. It's shocking that those numbers would be exactly the same. When since then, he basically gone in with Whit Babcock to build a new student athlete dorm.
Yep.
Bailed out the athletic department during COVID.
Fund.
He's throwing millions into the program in the year with a football enhancement fund that he personally had to approve. And he hasn't gotten more popular.
Hasn't moved the needle.
I think people
and outside of the realm of athletics, they've gotten the the Amazon thing going in
Northern Virginia. Point being, I don't think I'm going to have the university president on there in a poll like that anymore, because I think people are going to feel the way they feel about a university president, no matter what he does with athletics.
It's probably because he can't go on the field and win games.
Correct. It's not,
you know what I mean?
It's not so much. It's more about winning and losing. Like if the university president actually manages to make everybody happy, which of course is impossible, but even if he did, he wouldn't be doing his job, would he?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
All right. So Whit Babcock has an 83% approval rating, 57% approve, 26% strongly approve. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when you consider the high approval rating of all the coaches in that poll, which we'll get to later, it makes complete sense that the man who hired those coaches with such high approval ratings has himself a high approval rating.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if, we'll get to Pry. Pry's got a solid approval rating.
Yeah, there's some interesting detail there.
But if Virginia Tech football comes out and wins 6 games next year, and Brent Pry, people start to go, oh man, maybe Brent Pry really was the right hire, right? He's recruiting very well. Well, Pry's approval rating is going to go up, and assuming all the other coaches keep winning, right? Yeah. Then Babcock's approval rating is only going to go up. Yeah, it makes sense, right? I mean, women's basketball went to a Final Four. A lot of the other sports are doing well, and all those coaches, people seem to approve of their job. So
if you take the last 2 years as a whole, you've had some pretty remarkable achievements from softball, baseball,
a number of ACC a number of ACC championships.
Yeah. So to be clear, Whit's numbers are down from 4 years ago, but maybe not as down as much as I thought they would be for the athletic director of a football school.
That went 3-8.
Right. Whose first football hire didn't work, and then whose second football hire went 3-8 in his first year. I think Virginia Tech's a good place to work. Yeah. So we polled we only allowed TSL subscribers to vote in the poll. If this is a vote we had opened up to people,
you put it on Twitter. Man,
people pay good money for a TSL subscription, so you're more likely. One of those big donors is more likely to think like a TSL subscriber than he is like some random person on Twitter. Is basically what if you're willing to invest money.
Disgruntled people cancel their TSL subscriptions, and they're not even there to vote.
Correct.
They're so.
Correct. Exactly. right.
I can't believe I'm paying money for this.
So by its nature, it's a.
And I also didn't open up to the general public because I don't want opposing fans piling in and skewing the numbers or whatever. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to Brent Pry. Combined 75% approval rating, 55% approve, 20% strongly approve. How does that compare to Fuente?
Very, very close to what Fuente was the last time we did our poll in the summer of 2019.
After the 2018
So after a 6-7 season when Virginia Tech lost to ODU, had one of the worst defenses in school history, and almost lost the bowl streak until UVA'd, right?
And then Tech played Marshall.
And then Tech played Marshall, right? In the replay or the
December.
The December game to make sure the Fog Bowl. That's it. Yeah. But at any rate, very, very similar numbers to Fuente after that year. Fuente's numbers, of course, had dropped from the previous year, but very similar numbers, which shows me that the Tech fans in general they're not worried too much about one subpar season.
Well, I will say this. I think Fuente's status was based more on what's the record, whereas Pry's approval rating is probably strongly tilted by his personality.
Correct.
People like him.
He's very likable. He does a good job with keeping up relations with the fan base. I think people appreciate his strategy. And I think he probably got a few points boost because I ran that poll right after Virginia Tech went on this big recruiting run.
Yeah. There's
always
probably
helps.
at least 5 points in there that would have been on the other side.
But again, I think Virginia Tech's a good place to work because when you go 3-8, 75% of people still approve of.
Yeah.
75% Tech Sideline subscribers.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it helps to have a loyal fan base.
And
people that are, is the word understanding? Is that like people who have? I think I'm not going to say everybody that supports Virginia Tech has quote unquote realistic expectations, but I think a lot of people are looking at this from the perspective of, could he be doing better? Yeah, maybe, but for what the hand he was dealt, he's doing a pretty good job.
And I do think those are accurate numbers reflective of the donor base. Mm-hmm. So I ran a poll maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago about how many TSL subscribers are in the Hokie Club. And it was something around 70%.
Yeah, that's right.
70% of our users are in the Hokie Club.
And
they
75%
directly
of them
donate.
approved Pry.
Right. So. I can guarantee you that 75% of Twitter isn't in the Hokie Club. Okay. I think those approval rating numbers are
pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate when it comes to
our subscribers,
how the donor base feels.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do head coach Mike Young. 96% approval rating.
It's great to work at.
Oh, wait till we get to Kenny Brooks. 54% strongly approve of Mike Young's job and job he's doing, and 42% approve, and that combines up to 96%. Thoughts?
I don't. Yeah,
if you had done it last year, it'd have been through the roof.
If Mike Young, Mike Young would have been 100 last year.
Well, we'll get to Kenny Brooks here in a second.
Yeah, I mean,
not surprising.
Of course, he's very likable. He's local. He's popular with the fans.
His players are popular with the fans.
He has very likable players. You're absolutely right. And he gave us something we never had before, an ACC title.
We'll always have the ACC title.
Yep.
Now, here's the heavy hitter. Women's basketball head coach Kenny Brooks, 94% strongly approve, 6% approve. Add 94 and 6, and what do you get? You get 100% approval rate.
All right, so now to be fair, our polling software does not do decimal points.
So since you brought it up, remember about 1,500 people voted. 8 of them did not, in some degree, approve of the job Kenny Brooks is doing.
And I think all of those were basically I don't know. I don't care.
Neutral or I don't care or
right.
whatever.
No, I don't think a single person actually clicked disapprove.
I think it's safe to say that Kenny Brooks is doing a good job.
Yeah.
Okay, here you go. So Kenny, roughly 1,400 people voted on him. It was basically 100%. So I don't know. No opinion was 5 votes. Neutral was 3 votes.
Yeah.
Disapprove and strongly disapprove 0 and 0. So
I can say this with confidence that this is Kenny Brooks's peak power, peak polling power. You know, it's never going to get any better than that.
all downhill from here, Kenny.
I will say this: nothing's come out yet, but this was reported in April, and Witt told Andy Bitter this when Andy talked to him after they got back from the spring meetings, kind of like at the beginning of May, I think. But Kenny Brooks is supposed to get a contract extension sometime this summer. It has not been finalized yet, or hasn't been reported or anything. But he's going to. I think he's going to get a good paycheck for leading the program to its first ever Final Four.
Yeah,
and AC championship.
So we also have some numbers on John Sheff and Pete Demore, but at this point, I'm going to cut the discussion short and say, if you want to find out what their numbers are and read a lot of the context for what we talked about, the Tech Sideline subscription is for you.
Yeah, Chris wrote a story about it today.
Yes. So I've got pages and pages more material for this podcast. So you guys are holding in your hands the heights and weights of the freshmen football players who have reported and been heighted and weighed. So I don't know. You got
measured. We'll just say heighted.
You got to. I said that on purpose, by the way. My wife would think I didn't, but I did actually. I thought it was funny, so I said it. So let's hit some highlights. You already hit on. What was it, Tavarian Copeland, Chris, who was listed in his recruiting profile at 190 something?
No, that's project, and 178 pounds, and he's not listed at star, so that assumes he's either going to be playing Mike or Will, which are very physical positions. So his career is going to come down to how much weight he can put on, redshirting, of course. That goes without question.
Yeah,
but he's going to have to. His upper body is going to have to stay healthy.
He's
during his initial
6'3", by the way.
6'3", 178.
Yeah.
As a comparison, Dante Lovett, cornerback, 6 foot, 185. Right. Even Braylon Johnson, who was considered skinny at 171 on a 6'1" frame, well, he's a cornerback. Yeah. Right. So this is basically a tall corner playing one of your power linebacker positions, not the field side linebacker that plays in space, but one of the other positions. It's interesting because, like, you want him to get in there and play football and learn, but to actually be good at it at this level, he's going to have to put on 40, 50 pounds.
Wow.
So if he gets hurt early in his career because he's too small, and he can't lift weights, he'll never have a chance to get big enough to be good, right?
I feel like that's kind of where when you talk about projects not necessarily hitting the peak, that like something like that, just an injury along the way, that it
totally derails.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to this extremities for most guys, but with that weight, like I said, he's not going to be playing on the wide side of the field. He's going to be playing one of the two more physical linebacker positions.
So you don't think like he could switch to safety at some point in the future?
I mean, they signed 800 defensive backs last year. So, I mean, I don't think he will. I mean, I would say if they're going to keep him at linebacker with the type of physical contact, I would hold him out of contact his first year.
Yeah.
Dead serious. I know that's an extremity, but on a 6'3" frame, 178 pounds, I'm 178 pounds.
Well,
5'9" frame.
I'm 178 and I'm 5'8".
Right. And I work out every day. So it's a solid 178. He's 6'3". Like it's all, and I don't want to. This isn't his fault, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying Virginia Tech recruited a 178-pound linebacker, and this is how they have to get him to the point where maybe one day he's able to contribute to the program. Yeah. You see so many guys with shoulder injuries early in their career, and it kills them in the weight room. At the time in their career when they have to grow. Yeah. They have to grow. And he's going to be slamming shoulders with 320-pound offensive linemen every week. Yeah. Okay? So, like, I would hold him out until the spring of contact. I would. Unless he plays a different position. Yeah. Unless they move him to star or unless they move him to safety. So
I brought him up just because I wanted to use the red shirt button.
Yep.
So somebody else that jumps out at me is Jason Abbey, checked in at 6'3", 211, which is, I think, about what we expected. We know he's also a guy that's
I think he was listed at 225 on some of the recruiting sites, but people should not trust the recruiting sites because unless those guys go to a verified camp where they actually verify their heights and weights, most of those camps don't.
And those camps are becoming rare.
Right. And it's up to the recruit. The recruiting services straight up ask the recruit, what's your height and weight? Oh, yeah, I'm 6'3", 230, and then you enroll and they actually measure you and you're 6'1", 215. Right? So ignore all of that for the most part.
So another guy I think is, and I don't mean to be harping on the smaller guys, but there was a legit question, what size is Pop Watson? Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly, David or Nick, who was we had Pop on Triumph Spotlight. Were either one of you guys in the room for that? Because we took a picture afterwards, and I think the 5'11" is legit.
Well, the 5'11", 176 for him is not new.
Okay.
The weights were updated for only the guys who enrolled this summer.
Okay.
Yes. This was his listed weight in the spring when he was here.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just the guys who enrolled this summer.
So I think that's pretty accurate.
He looks more... He's got a good frame on him for a 5'11" guy. Like, he's got longer limbs. He looks like a guy who's... I don't think he's going to have trouble... He's not going to stay 176 for long. In fact, I'd be surprised if he was still 176.
Yeah. Anybody else you want to highlight?
Yeah.
Asen Stevens, 6'4", 237.
That's about what I expected, to be honest with you. Big guy. Could play linebacker or defensive end.
I was going to say, for those who are curious, Chris wrote an entire story on just
and that's
this.
why we're hitting some of
and
this.
talking about the star position, which is now formerly
the Sam position.
I
think that's purely for recruiting. I think it sounds
you're
better.
Going to be our star.
You're going to be our star linebacker, or you're going to be our Sam linebacker.
The moms hear that and go, yeah, you're going
to be the star. I'll say this. I'm very high on Caleb Woodson. He's a guy who was listed in the 200 to 205 pounds throughout the recruiting process. And I believe 247 had him at 205. Well, he enrolled at 215.
Nice.
Right? Yeah. And he's a star, and he was recruited specifically for the star. But I think depending on growth and what type of linebacker is, he could potentially play the other roles as well. Like Tech's linebacker positions aren't as cut and dried as they used to be. It used to be like you knew exactly who the Mike was going to be when he was recruited. You knew exactly who the backer was going to be.
You knew who the whip was going to be.
Right. Like you knew all that stuff. It was rare. Like Bruce Taylor played both positions, but very, very few guys.
I thought Bruce Taylor always looked like a Mike to me. What do you think?
Sometimes he could cover ground like a backer, but and he played more like a backer, but yes, he looked like a Mike.
Yeah.
So he was unique, but these days it's harder to tell. Like I will say, like if Vince Hall and Xavier DB were here right now, I think Vince Hall would play Will, and Xavier DB would play Mike. You're more mobile guy.
If I remember my Raleigh Hokie writings correctly, Vince Hall, for a Mike, had very good pass coverage skills.
Well, he was very good at everything, to be honest.
He was a great player.
but so a guy like Asen Stevens, he's definitely a wheel. He's a short side linebacker because he's not going to be able to play in space as well as the star or even the Mike. And you need your Mike a little more in coverage against wide receivers than you would your will linebacker. So I would say your least athletic linebacker is going to be Will. But it'll sort itself out. But I like Caleb Woodson a lot. I think Traylon Mitchell's a little bit of an underrated prospect, and he came in at 201 pounds, which I think is good.
I love 200 pounds for a running back.
That's solid. I'm trying to think if anything. Zeke Wimbush was a guy. Now he's technically a walk-on right now, but I think he'll be on scholarship in January. Again, listed at 210 during the recruiting process. Enrolls at 232.
Yeah. Nice.
But like, nobody bothered to ask him, how much do you really weigh? Because like, he wasn't a prospect till very late in the process and probably didn't go to any of those camps. So probably somebody was just like, yeah, he kind of looks like he's 210, so just write 210 pounds in there. And so again, don't you shouldn't get too caught up in all of that stuff, because you never truly know what's accurate and what's not. But there's, outside of Copeland coming in probably 15 pounds smaller than I thought he was, I don't see anything on this list that is a major surprise to me. And I will say the JUCO transfer, oh my gosh, the defensive end, James Jeanette. God, Tech brought in 33 new players this offseason. It's just hard to remember all their names. But
there are multiple Williams and multiple.
He was a JUCO recruit who was listed at 225, and he came in. And remember, he was listed as a 4-star recruit and the number 2 defensive end JUCO prospect, right? 225 pounds sounds great, and he enrolls at 205. So always ignore that initial stuff. Like he went to JUCO. Like California JUCOs are notorious for like not having
food.
Yes, the basic nourishments of life. Like they certainly don't have good weight rooms or qualified staff and things like that.
Netflix series, Last Chance U. I still haven't watched that. And Nick, did it center on JUCOs? Yeah. I got to go watch that.
Yeah, but there are good JUCO leagues and some that have a rep of just not being very good from a facility standpoint and a development standpoint. Yeah. He went to one of the JUCOs that I wish he hadn't gone to, because he's basically right now, he's starting very similar to player he was in high school when he went to William and Mary out of high school. So if he'd gone somewhere that was able to physically develop him. So right now he's Virginia Tech's smallest defensive end. He's only got 3 years left. He's only got 3 years. He's starting from a low point. He's a project, but he's only got 3 years to reach that top point instead of 5 years like a normal recruit.
Got some work to
do.
So
he's got some work to do.
All right, so let's hit. Let me pull my notes out here. Let's hit some news, and this might be me talking for about 5 minutes. But David, I do want to go over to you at one point.
Yeah, that's fine. We can bounce back and forth if you want me to.
Actually, I want to ask you guys about this. Virginia Tech at Vanderbilt in 2024 football game has been moved from Nissan Stadium, home of the Tennessee Titans, to the on-campus Commodore Stadium. Not knowing anything about
Nashville,
about Vanderbilt's football stadium, my first reaction was boo. I don't get to go to a pro venue.
Get a new stadium.
Vandy's renovating a lot of its stuff right now. Yeah. I saw Andy and Andrew Allegretto, who of course is the voice of Vanderbilt, they had like a back and forth on Twitter, and Andy's like, "Boo! Like I'm farther away from the bars and downtown," and Andrew's like, "Well, oh well." Like,
yeah, I mean, there's
like I don't know. I think it'll be neat, and Vanderbilt is obviously coming back to Blacksburg the year after, so. I don't know if it makes that much of a difference. I think it probably makes more of a difference from a tailgating perspective. Like whoever's going to Nashville, maybe you're more on campus instead of more, I guess, in the downtown area.
I don't watch the NFL anymore. I like college football. I like the college experience. It's just it'll be a smaller stadium, which means it'll be harder to get tickets. But
yeah,
and I'm sure the Titan Stadium is a very nice stadium and everything, but like if I'm going to a Vanderbilt football game in Nashville, I'd like to go to their own campus stadium. That's just my traditionalist viewpoint of it.
By the way, David, when was the last time Virginia Tech played in Vanderbilt's stadium?
Music City Bowl.
The 1998 Music City Bowl.
Beat Alabama. My parents were there.
I didn't go because Malcolm was due to be born like right around then.
Yeah, I was not born. I'm going to date you guys, but I was not born then, and I know Nick was not either.
You weren't.
Weren't you technically at the national title game though?
Yeah.
Couldn't see me, but I was there.
No, I was there.
Let's see. By the way, David put in my notes. This will be a good time to mention that Andy is running a series of early game previews for all of Virginia Tech's football opponents.
Yeah.
Those are subscriber articles.
Just published.
Good.
Yeah, just published Marshall today. Andy's doing a great job of breaking down, kind of just going through each team by each team and saying, hey, here's the last time Virginia Tech met Marshall, right? Well, in this case, it was 2018, the last game of the season, the makeup, kind of late edition. And here's what Marshall's bringing back, and here's their star players, and where should we expect Marshall to improve from last season, et cetera. And a lot of really good bullet-pointed stuff, very short, concise, simple, easy to read. I highly recommend you go check it out. Obviously, it's only July 5th, but we got plenty of football coverage.
Here's some quick Marshall trivia that I'm sure Andy covered. They were awesome on defense last year, and their offense was atrocious. Absolutely atrocious.
That seems to be a theme because Rutgers wasn't awesome on defense, but their offense was atrocious.
It was one of my questions for. I think I answered that in a Q&A last week, or I talked about it in a Q&A where Tech is facing something like 5 offenses this coming year that finished outside the top 100 in FBI offense.
Yeah, I think it was your last Q&A.
Yeah. So this year Tech faces a bunch of horrible offenses
and really good defenses.
And a bunch of really good defenses. So
based on last year's numbers.
It's early, but be prepared to bet the under if you're a gambler, I would say.
Yeah, particularly early on before Vegas figures things out. All right, the ACC-SEC Challenge in basketball has replaced the ACC Big Ten Challenge, of course, because ESPN no longer has the Big Ten media rights. So, David, the men will travel to Auburn as part of the ACC-SEC Challenge. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it's Wednesday, November 29th, 9:15 p.m. Eastern, so 8:15 Central. It'll be the 8th meeting in program history, the first since 1999. This is a really good Auburn program, and it's got Bruce Pearl at the helm. Auburn's been to 4 of the last 5 NCAA tournaments. The one they missed was because they were they self-imposed ban. Right.
Because Bruce Pearl's coaching them.
They were 21-13 last year, 10-8 in the ACC. They were number 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. So this is going to be a really good test. I didn't include it in the article that I wrote, but Mike Young doesn't always go out of his way to play on the road, right? I think, in the non-conference.
Right.
You'll remember 2 years ago, I believe, Tech played at Maryland, right? And that was in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Right. This past season, the Hokies played Minnesota at home.
But they haven't played a true road game.
There are rare true road games. Dayton was in there. Like, Dayton was a true road game.
Right.
But there haven't been many. Tech played at Navy that same year, right? But it's not always it's not a thing that I think Mike Young tries to do. I think it's kind of a pick your moments. Yeah. This is going to be a good test. I mean, Virginia Tech goes to Auburn. Auburn was 14-2 at home last year. This is gonna be a really good challenge to piece together Virginia Tech basketball's current non-conference schedule, which I'm sure it'll be all released in the coming weeks. Coppin State season opener at home on November 6th. We've got the South Carolina game on Veterans Day, Friday. That's in Charlotte, November 10th. It's been reported Tech has Wofford on November 19th, the weekend Sunday before Thanksgiving. Then Tech's got 3 games in the ESPN Events Invitational in Orlando, which is Boise State, Butler, Florida Atlantic, who went to the Final Four, Iowa State, Penn State, Texas A&M, and VCU, and then Tech has American in December. So more pieces will be added there.
Is that a tournament format? I mean,
yes, it will be a tournament format. So they'll play. It'll be kind of like the Charleston Classic, where it's like you play and you advance, and if you lose, you go down to the loser's bracket.
Yeah, exactly.
So everybody gets an equal
winner's bracket, loser's bracket. So you want me to talk about the women too?
Oh yeah, so this, you go to the Final Four, and the next thing you know, ESPN's jumping through hoops to put you up against national
big
powers.
time teams.
So drill down into that.
So the last time you guys were on the podcast, we had Charlotte resident Kendall Williams on here. And you guys talked about Virginia Tech going to Charlotte because the day before the men play, the women play Iowa there, which of course Iowa went to the national championship game last year and lost to LSU.
Excuse me, it's pronounced Caitlin Clark, not Iowa.
who Virginia Tech drew in the ACC SEC Challenge. Tech goes to Baton Rouge. Pretty disappointing playing that game in Castle Coliseum, man.
That would have been awesome.
I think that might have been close to a sellout. You get the national champions coming back, and this was a team you met in the Final Four. But it'll be Tech's. I'm trying to read my notes. Thursday, November 30th, 9 p.m. Eastern, so it'll be 8 p.m. Central. 4th all-time meeting, 3rd trip to Baton Rouge, first since 2006. Obviously, Tech played LSU in the Final Four last year. So put together the women's schedule. Obviously, it's not as much announced as the men's, but Tech has Iowa. And then on Thursday, November 9th in Charlotte, 3 weeks later, it'll play LSU. So that's... And you're talking about they're going over Thanksgiving. You're going to the Cayman Islands, and LSU, UConn, UCLA, Kansas, Niagara, Tulane, and Virginia are in that. And if I had to put money on it, my guess is Tech will probably end up with a game against a UConn.
Yeah,
because if the two teams are there, and ESPN's already saying you're playing at LSU and you're playing Iowa. Virginia Tech, I think what people need to understand now, and I think it's kind of obvious, Virginia Tech, at least for the time being, is recognized as a national player on the college basketball stage, women's college basketball. And you see that they're playing on a one-off Ally tip-off in Charlotte, right? It's not like a tournament. It's not a doubleheader. It's not a triple-header like the men. It's a one-off game in Charlotte.
It's a totally arranged game to have these two teams play.
Which shows you how much, and of course they're playing in Charlotte, which is a great place for Virginia Tech
made
fans.
for television game.
But
Ally is the company that has kind of thrown its marketing weight behind women's sports.
Yes.
So this is a big deal.
Yeah, but the Hokies are playing in a great tournament in the Cayman Islands. They draw LSU. I tell you what, we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about this, but if you compare the ACC, SEC men's challenge to the women's challenge schedule is so much better.
Is it really?
Yeah, I mean, I think the men, they stayed away from like the obvious like Duke, Kentucky, I don't remember exactly who the games are on the men's side, but we've got like North Carolina, South Carolina on the women's side. I want to say maybe Tennessee, Notre Dame. Some really, really good games.
So who is Kentucky playing? Men's side, do you remember?
I want to say it's North Carolina, Tennessee. I do not remember, but
I'll tell you what,
doesn't Kentucky play Duke every year anyway?
Pretty much, yeah.
The day Kentucky comes to Castle Coliseum, the day I'm an astronaut, buddy.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm really excited for that. That'll be, especially for the women. I mean, you're playing on the TV games have not been announced yet, but I'd be surprised if Tech's on anything but ESPN.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's run down some news items and then check out here on Thursday, June 8th, Julia Fixon won the national championship in the women's pole vault. So congratulations to her. Second national title in this academic year for Virginia Tech, joining Youssef Ramadan, is that how it's pronounced, who won the 100 fly. So David, this was an interesting note from you. It gives the Hokies 22 individual national champions in school history. All but 2 are from track and field. And the 2 who are not from track and field are Ramadan and, of course, Makai Lewis. So that's interesting. More props for Dave Chinelli's program. Justin Mutz signed a contract to play in the NBA Summer League with the Sacramento Kings. Justin Robinson is also participating with the Charlotte Hornets.
Played really well.
Yeah, the Tech men's basketball has been putting up some highlights here and there, and looks like Five's playing pretty well.
Man,
good. He's coming off a knee injury. Right?
Yeah.
Hokie Vision and Virginia Tech's ACC Network team took home 2 Capital Emmy Awards on June 27th for their coverage specifically of Hokies baseball and softball throughout the 2022 season.
So I put this on here. You guys know this. I don't know how many other people know this, but I used to, when I was a student, I worked for Hokie Vision and the ACC Network and did a lot of graphics operations, which is physically writing up the graphics, coming up with ideas, and putting them on the screen that you see. So all these statistical breakdowns and stuff. It's a fantastic crew back there, and it's almost all students. I mean, they have like probably, specifically on the ACC Network side, they probably have 4 to 6 full-time people, and everybody else it's entirely student run. And so, for those watching, listening, for those who complain on our message boards about how bad the production is, Virginia Tech is winning awards for how good the production is. So just understand it. Just kind of wanted to give them props. There's an article on Hokie Sports that tells more about it, but they, like, Virginia Tech's ACC network production is probably one of, if not the best in the ACC.
So when you were working on a broadcast that would go out on the ACC network, did you make sure to switch the UVA and Tech logos? Because that's
we never got
was
that
that
wrong.
you, Dave?
Imagine someone from Virginia Tech wouldn't get that wrong.
Yes. No.
Good gracious.
In late June, Triumph NIL was named one of Sports Business Journal's Power Players in Collegiate NIL. I wonder, I know the guys at Triumph who do Triumph Spotlight and all that stuff, and I wonder if people out there think that I'm really tight with them and I know everything they do. That's not the case at all. I don't ask them questions. I'll let them do their thing. So this is just me talking, not any inside info or anything like that. I've got to feel that the success in getting certain transfers and maybe certain high school recruits to commit, I see Triumph NIL playing some sort of role there. I do think that organization is fully in place and fully functioning and carrying out their vision.
And to be clear, you can't use money as an inducement.
That is correct.
But
that doesn't mean.
But they can come in and ask questions about the organization, how it's run.
Yeah.
They can ask Virginia Tech's other players,
what benefits are they getting from
it, things like that.
And
Yes.
Triumph NIL has rolled out their digital network, and I think the way it was phrased to me was recruits see what Triumph is doing and it's resonating with them. So
They have from everything. Obviously, we've had the opportunity to have a lot of really cool student athletes in here and have a lot of the staff from Triumph in here.
They used the canteen.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that the other day.
Yeah.
The video of Derek Canteen sitting in this chair. From speaking with Brent Bryan, I'd be curious when we talk with him next to kind of get his take on how much they're still evolving in the NIL space, but not just with football, with other sports too. Triumph seems to have done a really, really good job at just continuing to progress and evolve and keep up with a lot of the other big players in the game.
yeah, I think everybody thinks NIL is it's just a money grab. It's just cash changing hands. But I think something that Triumph has done is they talk to me about how the model they build, they want it to be sustainable. And I think what they mean by that is as state governments do things by their whims, who knows what the NCAA is going to do? Who knows what the federal government's going to do?
I know what the NCAA is going to do. Nothing.
Did you see the thing that this was like 2 weeks ago? I think the NCAA like 2 weeks ago, the NCAA put out a statement basically saying that for NIL organizations, we want you to listen to
our rules instead of your state's
and you
rules.
know what a lot of the schools around the country said? No, we're listening to the state
And
rules.
then New York passed a state law that basically says the NCAA has no jurisdiction in our state.
So let's clarify for people. I think Texas was actually the first to do it.
Because you think the University of Texas is going to let the NCAA say what it was?
Texas the state of Texas passed a law.
Yeah.
And I think the law essentially said you can fundraise for NIL through your
Booster
athletic
clubs,
department, through your well-established booster club, which was something not allowed by the NCAA. And then the Texas state law also said that the NCAA is not allowed to punish Texas schools for violating the NCAA's rules. Wow.
and so the NCAA says, you have to listen to us. And Texas says, no, we aren't.
So this all sounds funny, but this is why administrators want the federal government to get involved and set some baseline rules that everybody has to follow.
Because what Virginia and North Carolina are doing is different than a Texas.
Oh, I doubt the state of Virginia is doing anything.
Oh, no, of course not.
Meanwhile, all these
and I'll be honest. From a competitive standpoint, yes, I want them to, but I think it's completely idiotic that state governments have to get involved in this anyway.
But
that's where we've come. That's what it's come to.
Every state in the SEC though is going to do what Texas did and what New York did.
It's kind of like the Wild Wild West.
Right.
Man.
Yeah. So it's the federal government is going to get involved in some point. I'm sure.
Well, I'm curious to see Charlie Baker, the new NCAA president. I'm curious to see. He's a former politician.
Correct.
I'm curious to see how he handles all of that.
I heard a very interesting statement about Charlie Baker. He has not been hired to lead the NCAA. He's been hired to lobby on behalf of the NCAA.
Right.
That's an interesting statement, and it makes sense with his background. But so back to the federal government doing anything. The opinion is that, there's some half-baked bills that are being put before various committees and stuff like that. And the consensus of opinion seems to be, if something doesn't get done soon, then the 2024 election cycle is going to completely overtake everything, and it's not going to happen.
Right.
And you're going to have the wild, wild west of NIL go on for another year or two.
Yeah.
Right.
Because a lot of the stuff will change hands.
Yeah. The whole process starts all over again with the next group of elected officials.
Politicians.
Right, exactly.
All right, fellas, good show. We've been here quite a while.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you want to mention the softball hire?
I do.
Josh Johnson,
hired from Mississippi State. Is that right?
as the new pitching coach. I think that's the only other big piece of news.
So let's not gloss that over. Virginia Tech made a hire away from an SEC school.
Yeah, this was Thursday, June 15th. Go to techsideline.com. Chip Grubb wrote a really informative story on just everything Josh Johnson brings. He has great experience in terms of his pitching staffs being really good on the collegiate level, but I think this is maybe the most interesting thing. He was a pitcher and an outfielder in the North American Fast Pitch Association from 2004 to 2017. He's a 16-time NAFA All-World Team selection. He was the association's MVP in 2014. So he has experience in actually pitching in fast pitch, right? And I think that's something that some people might not grasp if you're not necessarily a deep into it softball fan. But he has been successful everywhere he's been. He was at Ball State. He was at UTEP. He's kind of been all over the place. That's a really, really good hire. Chip Grubb, in his story, he had an excerpt from, I want to say it was an editor from one of the national softball or outlets websites.
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I don't remember what outlet. I don't want to say it if I don't know it. But who basically said, "Oh, this is a knockout, out of the ballpark hire for Pete DeMore." So that's, I think, the only other big piece of news that has to be covered.
I still want a softball stadium. I actually voted neutral on Witt because I'm mad at him for not building a softball stadium.
No. Okay, here's the thing: we're two-faced here because we sit here and talk about this money that gets thrown into facilities. The proper way to do it now is to throw it into NIL.
I didn't say my feeling was rational.
Fair enough.
It's just I just get mad when I see everybody else's facilities. Anyway, appreciate everybody watching.
That was episode 300.
Listening and watching at episode 300, brought to you by First Bank and Trust Company and the Hokie Way. And I'm not going to make any promises, but I don't think we'll wait 4 weeks to have the next one.
Between now and then, last week of July, we'll be down at the ACC football kickoff in Charlotte.
That is true. That starts 3 weeks from Virginia Tech is going to be up there 3 weeks
Wednesday.
from today.
Yeah.
So
we'll have plenty of content. Andy will be back from vacation eventually, and we'll have plenty of content for everybody.
That man takes some vacation, man. I didn't realize how much vacation he took.
Yep.
So we're all just trying to be like Andy.
Chris is going to New Orleans.
I'm going to New Orleans. Then I'm going to Dublin.
Ireland.
Yep.
Not
too last. Yeah, it's been a good spring and summer trips.
And you and I were both on vacation in June.
I spent 2 weeks on the European River Cruise.
Well,
I was out west.
The good thing about having so many
Washington.
full-time employees is there's always somebody to mind the fort, so to speak. So you can rotate all this stuff in the summer.
Yeah, that going from 3 people to 4 really made a huge difference. But anyway, I appreciate everybody listening and watching, and we'll see you next time on the Tech Sideline Podcast.